Dear students, today we are going to discuss about demand analysis. The main points for discussion today are, we need to know what is demand in general and what are the factors influencing demand for a product or determinants of demand, and then what is the concept of elasticity and elasticity of demand, and how to forecast the demand for existing products and new products. So our focus is on meaning of demand and elasticity of demand and the forecasting of demand. These are the three main aspects which we are going to discuss today. We are all aware that the demand refers to the market demand, and market demand is the sum of individual consumers' demand. By adding the demands of all individual consumers at a given price, how much each individual is going to purchase, you get the total market demand. So arithmetically, if you add the demands of all individual consumers, you will get market demand for a commodity at that given price. And the same thing you can also express geometrically by horizontal summation of individual demand curves. So market demand is the summation of individual demand curves of individuals. So we need to know what is the individual's demand curve. The background for demand analysis is we have to start with consumers' demand and consumers' equilibrium. And there are two approaches to explain consumers' equilibrium. One is neoclassical cardinal utility approach developed by Alfred Marshall, and second one is the modern approach developed by Hicks. So whatever may be the approach, we get the same results. That is, the consumer's equilibrium can be explained either with the cardinal approach or with the ordinal approach. The only thing is, in case of cardinal approach, we make the assumption that demand utility can be measured. So it is based on the assumption of measurable utility. And whereas ordinal utility analysis was developed by removing that measurable utility assumption. That is the only thing. And using these two, we can derive individual consumers' demand, and we know that market demand is the summation of individual demands. Let us discuss in detail about the determinants of demand and what is the meaning of demand and the determinants of demand. In economics, we use to define the word demand as the number of units of a commodity that customers are willing to buy at a given price and under a given set of conditions. Demand always means how many units people are willing to buy, consumers are willing to buy, given the price and given the set of conditions. The main salient points which we have to cover are, what are the determinants of demand, or factors that influence the demand for a commodity. Generally, there are four determinants of demand for any commodity, that is own price, incomes of people, prices of substitutes or complements called as price of related commodities, and wants or tastes or desires of the consumer. These are the basic determinants for any commodity in general, and the specific determinants may vary from commodity to commodity. Based on the nature of the commodity, sometimes some other determinants may be there. But for all commodities in general, if you want to write a demand function, you can have a quantity demanded is a function of P, own price, Y, income, and PR, price of related goods. W stands for wants or tastes of the consumer. In economics, we generally try to explain different types of functions: demand function, supply function, production function, cost function. So we should learn how to write a function and what is the meaning of a function. So generally, we have to write function as dependent variable is a function of independent variables. On the right hand side, you have independent variables, and on the left hand side of the equation, you have dependent variable. That means a change in any one of the independent variable will cause a change in the dependent variable. That means, for example, when there is a change in price, there will be a change in quantity. Similarly, when there is a change in income, there will be a change in quantity. So a change in independent variable will cause a change in dependent variable. That is how you have to write any function. So we have to know that dependent variable is a function of independent variable. This is how we have to write a function. Let us start with the meaning of demand. We have seen that Demand means number of units of a commodity that customers are going to buy under a given price under a given set of conditions. Another aspect is, in order to say that there is a demand for a commodity, there needs to be three important conditions have to be satisfied. One is desire to acquire the commodity, and second one is willingness to pay for the commodity, and third one is ability to pay for a commodity. Unless these three aspects are there, you cannot call it as a demand for commodity. Take the case of a poor man, for example. Take the case of a poor man, a beggar, for example. He wants to have a car, and he is also willing to pay provided he has capacity, but he has no capacity to pay for the car. So a poor man's desire to purchase a car cannot be called as demand, because he doesn't have the ability to pay for the commodity. In case of a miser, for example, he has the ability to pay and he has the desire for the car also, but he is not willing to pay. Then also we cannot call it as demand for a commodity. And you can also visualize a third situation where a person is having the willingness as well as ability, but he has no desire for a commodity. So these three things must be present, then only you can call it as demand for a commodity. So in the first point, under the demand analysis, the first part we focus on what are the determinants of demand, how to write a function, and what is a demand schedule, a demand curve, and what is a demand law, and exceptions to the law of demand. The price quantity relation you can express in terms of a verbal statement, you can express in terms of numbers, or in terms of a graphical presentation. So simply the quantity demanded varies inversely with price. That is the verbal statement of law of demand. And you can show that in terms of a table and in terms of a graph also. So that becomes a demand schedule and demand curve. What is a demand schedule? Demand schedule is a list of prices of commodities, and the list is so arranged that at each price the corresponding amount is the quantity purchased at that price. So you can define demand schedule as a list of prices and quantities. For example, you can see here the price quantity. So demand schedule say 10, 9, 8 and quantity 1000, 2000 and 3000 units. This is called a demand schedule. So price per unit 10, 9, 8. When price declines from 10 to 9, quantity increases from 1000 units to 2000 units, and when it further declines from 9 to 8, it increases from 2000 to 3000. So this price quantity relation, what type of relation you observe here? When price declines, quantity increases. Or you see the reverse way. For example, price increases from 8 to 9 or 9 to 10. Then quantity decreases from 3 to 2 and 2 to 1000. So always you observe an inverse relation between price and quantity, and that inverse relation we call it as a law of demand. So we need to define certain terms like what is the meaning of a commodity in economics, and is there any difference between commodity and product? What is the definition of price or meaning of price, and what is the definition of a market? In economics, commodities is defined in a very broad way. Commodities include not only goods, physical objects, but also services. For example, like say service of a doctor, teacher, etc. are also called as commodities. After all, what you are expecting from a TV, the services of a TV or refrigerator, even durable commodities also, the consumer is expecting the services from that durable commodity. So commodities broadly includes services also. And if you want to have a distinction between commodity and product, you can do it. That is, generally these two can be used interchangeably. And if you want to have a perfect meaning of or distinction of these two, how they are used in economics, you may say that commodities are output of industry are called commodity, and output of a firm is called product. That means automobile is a commodity. So suppose Swift Desire is a product of Maruti Udyog Limited. So the product, the output of a firm is known as product, and output of an industry may be defined as commodity. Now let us see what is the meaning of price in economics. Price means money value per unit of the commodity. It has a simple meaning always. It is price means money value per unit. And how you define the word market? Generally, market is also defined in a broader way. It need not be confined to a physical geographical area. So the essential point is there should be contact between buyer and seller. The contact may be, the buyer and seller may meet in a physical market, or the contact may be established through telephone or internet, whatever may be the thing. The essential thing is there should be contact between buyer and seller, then that is called market. So a market can be a geographical area, but it need not be confined to physical geographical area. So let us come to the demand function. So quantity demanded is a function of own price, incomes of people, price of related goods and bonds, that is. So we have seen that when price increases, quantity decreases, or when price declines, quantity increases. That is, there is inverse relation between price and quantity that is established. And what type of relation you can observe between income and quantity? Generally, whenever the incomes of people increase, they buy more. When their incomes are more, they buy more, and when their incomes are low, they buy less. So there is a positive relation. When income increases, quantity increases, and when income decreases, quantity decreases. The positive relation between the two variables. And the third one is, third major determinant of demand for commodity is prices of related commodities. And prices of related goods may be complements or substitutes. What is the meaning of a substitute? Substitutes are those commodities that replace the use of this commodity. For example, one brand of TV to that of another brand of TV. One brand of toothpaste, another brand of toothpaste. So it can replace the commodity, that is called substitute. And complementaries, they go together like scooter and petrol, or automobile, car and petrol, gasoline. So you have to use them together. So how the quantity responds to a change in the price of related commodities. Take the case of a price of a substitute. When the price of a substitute commodity increases, its demand declines and the demand for our product will increase. Similarly, when the price of a substitute, for example, this a subscript stands for subscript. Price of a substitute declines, its demand increases, and the demand for our product also declines because they will go to substitute, because the substitute product is available at a relatively cheaper rate. So our demand for our product will decline. So it moves in the same direction. You see positive relation between the two variables. So the diagram will be like this, a positive sloping. In case of substitute commodities, the demand curve slopes upwards. And in case of, let us see, the complementaries. Complementary items, they go together. When the price of a complementary item declines, the demand for complementary item increases, and not only that, the demand for our product will also increase. So quantity demand of this product will increase. And in the opposite case, vice versa. So there is inverse relation between the two, like this. Complements. Generally, in economics, if you want to study the specific relation between price and quantity, we make the assumption of ceteris paribus. That means other things remaining constant. So to isolate the effect of change in quantity due to change in price alone, we assume that other things remaining constant. But in real world, the other things may not remain constant. A manager cannot assume that other things remain constant, and he cannot assess the change in price and quantity alone. He has to take into cognizance the effect of change of other variables also simultaneously. When all other variables change, what happens to quantity, or how quantity responds when there is a change in all variables. By using multiple regression analysis, he can identify the impact of change in all variables when there is a change in impact of all variables on the quantity demanded. The price to quantity relation, when expressed into a graph, that becomes a demand curve. In the table form, we have presented demand schedule as a list of prices and quantities, and at each price the corresponding amount is the quantity demanded at that price. So we have seen 10, 9, 8 and 1000, 2000 and 3000. This is a price quantity relation expressed in terms of a schedule, demand schedule. And if you convert this into a graph, that becomes demand curve. A smooth transition from arithmetic to geometry. So these are the aids or tools to explain relations. The relation between two variables can be explained verbally, or with numbers, or with graph. So to facilitate understanding, all these visual aids are used to explain a concept or theorem. For example, here say price quantity. When price is 10, quantity is 1000. And when price is 9, quantity 2000, and when price is 8, quantity 3000. So connecting these points, you will get demand curve. So DD is the demand curve. On the x-axis we have represented quantity, and on y-axis we have represented price. Here one interesting point is, those who are familiar with presentation of graphs, they will immediately question that price on x-axis normally you have to present independent variable, and on y-axis a dependent variable. That is the general rule of writing any graph. So as per that logic, price being the independent variable, you have to present price here and quantity here on y-axis. Price on x and quantity on y. That is the general, as per the generally accepted rule. But why price is shown on the y-axis and quantity is shown on the x-axis? If you refer to any textbook of economics, you will find only price on y-axis and quantity on x-axis. The reason for this is, majority of the economists, they simply say that it is a convention started with Alfred Marshall and people are using it. And showing price on y-axis and quantity on x-axis is a convention established by Alfred Marshall, and simply people are following it. That may not be a logical answer, but some other economists, they try to answer this puzzle by saying that generally a firm has control over its quantity of output. In the earlier days, people realized that a firm has control over its output and it has no control over price. So it can manage, it can increase or decrease its output, but it cannot change the price. Price is determined in the market or by outside forces. So they considered quantity as independent variable and price as dependent variable. So whatever may be the arguments, debate, let us accept price on y-axis and quantity on x-axis. We don't want to reverse this already existing practice. So you can see this is the inverse relation. So whenever there is inverse relation between two